I have been blogging for 11 years. That's a long time to be blogging. As I've grown a community and worked with other bloggers and learned about marketing and interaction and scheduling and so on, I've picked up some lessons about branding along the way. I've had the opportunity to work with companies in the past on marketing, but not so much branding. But I picked up some lessons that apply to both brands and blogs. And so if you're working on a blog for your company or you're thinking about starting a blog, these are some ways that will help shape your brand and implement it in the most successful way possible. This is the art of the brand, what your blog needs and deserves. So as you know, my name is Wade Kwon. I'm a communication consultant from Birmingham. I also have this annual conference called Y'all Connect. It's my pleasure to be here today in Hattiesburg with the Pine Belt PRAM group. I was down in Hattiesburg a few weeks ago to talk to the Pine Belt entrepreneurs, and I hope a lot of you sign up for the PRAM conference because I'll be speaking there next month on a different topic. But if you have questions, don't save them for the end. Just raise your hand. I'll be happy to take questions throughout. My Twitter name's @WadeOnTweets. If you think of a question, if you think of something you want to tweet out, feel free to share it on Twitter or any social media channel that you like. And at the end, I've got some door prizes to give out. I've got some additional materials for free, so stick around. Three things I want to cover today in talking about your blog and your brand. For starters, setting goals. I usually start out with goals just because it helps shape the direction you want to go in. It helps figure out what you're going to do with your blog and what you're going to do with your brand and so on. So it's always a good starting point. We're going to talk about defining your values. So what do you stand for? What does your company represent? How do you distinguish yourself from all the other brands and companies and competitors out there? We'll talk about defining your values and making sure that they're crystal clear. And the last part is a secret weapon called consistency. So if you don't have a zillion-dollar budget for your marketing, this is a simpler way to make sure that you stand out to fans, to customers, and so that you can attract the right audience, so that you can build your sales, so that you can improve customer service. Starting out, you want to have a goal in mind. I imagine that many of you, for yourselves or for the departments or for the companies you work for, you have goals for 2016. Those goals could be set around sales, they could be set around customer service, they could be set around budget, they could be set around personnel. But they give you direction in terms of where you want to go and how you're going to do it and how many resources you're going to need and so on. Sometimes we forget to set goals and we tend to wander aimlessly. So starting off with a goal can be important because it shapes what comes afterward. Back in 2012, I had read a book called The 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. And it's an interesting book. It's got lots of ideas and things you can try in terms of nutrition and diet and exercise and taking care of yourself. I've been skinny my whole life, and that's been a challenge. It doesn't sound like a big problem, but if there's ever been something about yourself that you wanted to change and you're having trouble changing it, perhaps you can understand. So I wanted to see if I could gain weight and gain muscle, because I'd never been able to change my weight in my entire life. So this book had some different solutions, and I had nothing to lose, so I thought I'd try it out. But on top of that, I created this blog called Project Bulk, and that's just so I could have a way to track it, and so people could keep up with it and push me forward. Because I've had friends who've been on diets, I've had friends who've been on exercise programs, and their challenge was sticking to it. And since I'd never done it before, I was afraid I might just fall off the wagon as soon as I started. So I thought I might get some public accountability out of blogging about it. So I launched the blog in September 2012, and I started out writing, once a day, and then I'd give updates maybe 2 times a week, and then 1 time a week, and that pulled back to about once a month. And the only reason I stopped blogging so frequently is just because I found that I could stick to the routine, and so the only thing that there was to post would be updates, like what was my weight that week, and what had I eaten, and how many repetitions had I done, and so on. So in the first 6 months, I might have posted like 40 or 50 posts or so, and I'd share it on social media, but I wouldn't share it any more than other blog posts I'd write about my business or my company or my event, and so on. So I started this in September 2012, and by springtime, I noticed a big difference. But it's not a difference in how I feel. It's not a difference in how I look. It's something else. In Birmingham, I go to events just like this one, to professional groups and meetings and conferences and networking events. And I make small talk with people because I usually run into someone I know. And they'll ask me about work or family or anything else, and we'll make small talk. But around springtime, I noticed people would come up to me, and the first question they'd ask wasn't how you're doing, how are you doing? It'd be how's Project Bulk going, or how are your workouts going, or how's your new diet going? And that was weird to me because I didn't talk about it. Like I didn't volunteer this information, and I wasn't some newfound convert to CrossFit or paleo. And I wasn't in your face about it. Perhaps you know someone who is really into CrossFit and has told you nothing but CrossFit stuff for the last year. So I wasn't evangelizing this by any means. I was just tracking it and blogging it and so on. But all of a sudden, people associated me with this. So this professional brand that I'd crafted myself for years of being an expert in communication and someone who's in the know about things in Birmingham, seemingly overnight, it changed, and my personal brand was now about workout and diet and exercise. I'd never set foot in a gym before I started this. I'd never been on a diet before. I didn't know anything more than what I'd just tried on my own. I didn't know if this was the best method or not. I hadn't tried other regimens, and you have to be careful about setting out in terms of what you're doing in your blog and what you're doing in your brand, because if you don't have a goal, you can accidentally alter your brand, and it may not always be for the positive. You want to be deliberate about what you do in terms of your blog, your brand, your marketing, and how you put yourself or how you put your company or how you put your products out there. In setting goals, you typically have numbers attached to them. You typically have a timeline attached to it, so you have something to measure against over a period of time. I mentioned that you may have goals for your business for 2016, so you might want to increase sales by 10% by the end of the year. You might want to decrease customer wait time on the phone by 30 seconds by December 31st. Something that you can measure, something you can track against 2015, something where you can see you're doing better or worse. Because if you can't measure it, it's hard to know if you're making progress on it. So in terms of your brand and your blog, if you're trying to increase sales, you want to think about, okay, is our brand consistent with our customers? Are we using our blog as a sales tool? What's working on the blog? Do we need to increase the number of posts so that we can increase the number of sales? Or do we need to change topics? Or do we need to outsource the writing of it? Or what do we need to do to make sure that we're hitting our goal by the end of the year? So as you set up your goals, make sure that you can measure them. Dividing the goal into steps, bite-sized chunks, makes it a lot easier to comprehend, because it's hard to think about those big year-end goals and figure out what the next step is. It might paralyze you because it seems so far down the road, you don't know how to get there, and then all of a sudden it's December 31st and you haven't made any progress. So you break it down into interim steps and interim deadlines or mini goals. When I started with Project Bulk, I read the book, I went and bought some equipment, I shopped around to see what gyms memberships cost, I bought different food, I watched videos to learn how to do the exercises, And so I broke it down into manageable steps. Now, I didn't get it all done on day one, but I knew that each day I was making just a little bit of progress so that 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, I'd be healthier, I'd be, in better shape and so on. But I knew for myself that if I didn't break it into steps, it would just sit there and I'd never get around to it. You want to make sure that if you are trying to use your blog for sales, April you might spend looking at what topics worked and what didn't work, what got the most traffic. May you might want to spend developing new content for the blog and how you're going to post it and where you're going to promote it and who's going to write and are you going to outsource it and so on. June might be spent redesigning the blog so that it's mobile friendly and so that it's got a fresher design. July might be spent starting to put out the new content and seeing how it's going and how it tracks against sales. Are people signing up for your email newsletter? Are they going to your catalog pages? Are you driving traffic to your retail outlet? So those are interim steps that you can take so that as you're integrating your brand and your blog into your major goals, you have a way to make progress. And if you fall behind 1 week because you get busy or there's an emergency or you're out sick, then you can pick right back up. You don't feel like you're so far behind that you can never catch up. You might recognize all this talk about planning and goals by the more formal name of a business plan. How many of you have ever written a business plan before? Quite a few of you. So you understand the value of putting it down on paper and not just listing your goals, but your competitors, your marketing strategy, your budget for the next 1 to 5 years, what your competitive advantage is, and so on. But within all of that, how does your brand fit into all of that? What is people's perception of your brand? How are you showing it off? Are you showing it off in print material? Are you showing it off online? Do your colleagues embody your brand? And is a blog part of your customer service? Is it part of your branding effort? Is it part of your sales strategy? Is it part of just basic marketing? Is it to gain interaction with people? These are the steps that you can outline in the business plan. And it's not just for launching a new business. It could be for a product at your company. It could be for a new division. It could be for a new retail outlet. Anything that takes planning and has a wide scope, a business plan can be awfully handy in trying to figure it all out. So in looking at the big picture of your blog and your brand, first you're going to set goals. They're going to be measurable. You're going to be able to break them into steps so that you can work on it a little at a time. And you might even go as far as putting it together in a business plan so that you have something that you can keep up with, because it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day urgent stuff and just get completely off track. I've certainly found that to be true as an entrepreneur and wearing many hats and trying to put out fires, but also trying to move forward on things that I want to get done during the year. So some of you, have well-defined brands with your company or your organization, and it's crystal clear. Others, your brand may not be well-defined. It may be fuzzy. It may have gone through some changes. You may be working with a new organization or a startup, so it may not be well-defined yet. But it is important to figure out what those core values are, because that's how people perceive your brand, and that's how you're going to get maximum effort out of your marketing, your blogging, and other channels. So a few years ago, I went into online dating. I wanted to try it out and see what it was all about. And I'd never done it before, so I just signed up for eHarmony and Match.com. And if you've never done it before, you just fill out a profile and you upload your photo, and if you sign up for like a paid membership, then you get some more bells and whistles with your account. But the profile's easy. I mean, it just takes 5 minutes. A child can fill it out. What's your name? What's your favorite food? What's your favorite color? Where do you live? What do you do? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? And so on. So I filled it out, put my picture up there, and So, I was looking at profiles of women since that's who I wanted to date, and I didn't know if my profile was any good because I never saw any men's profiles. So I didn't know if it was interesting or too short or too long or I didn't know if it stood out at all. But I noticed that after I looked at 20 or 30 profiles, a few minutes later I wouldn't remember anything about the people I just looked at. Just nothing stood out. And I'm sure they're all unique and remarkable individuals, but their profiles just kind of blurred together. And so I wondered if maybe my profile was falling into that same trap, because maybe that's why people weren't responding or reaching out to me. So I took my profile and I had my friend look at it. Her name's Jen. I've known her since high school, so she knows me really well. And she just also happens to be a branding expert. And so she reads through the profile and she shakes her head and says, "This is terrible." And she said, there's nothing compelling about it. It's just too generic. She said, look at this part. So it says here you like music. A big deal. Everyone here likes music. But I mean, is that Lady Gaga or is that Garth Brooks? Is that Beethoven, or is it, the Foo Fighters? Because it's all music, but I hadn't put anything specific in my profile. And she points out, it's like, here it says you like movies, big deal. Everybody likes movies. But I hadn't picked a director, I hadn't picked an actor, I hadn't picked a favorite movie, I hadn't picked a genre, I hadn't done anything. And what she said next just kind of hit me in the gut. She said, "You are afraid to put yourself out there. You are afraid of rejection." And I let that sink in. She was absolutely correct, of course. And really the only way to fix this was just start over again. So I just cleared out the profile and just looked at each question, put a lot of thought into it. And, as a writer, sometimes it's challenging to write about yourself. Even though that's the subject you know best, it's sometimes hard to put it down on paper. So I took a lot of time in making sure that the profile was as good as it could be. And before I posted it, I showed it to Jen, and she looked it over, and she said, "This sounds like you. This is you." So I had passed her test. But what she showed me, I didn't forget, because I was able to apply it to things beyond just this dating profile. She pointed out that because I had put my real self out there, that I get a lot more rejections up front. But that would be a good thing, because the people who reached out to me, the people who saw the profile and saw something that they were interested in, they'd make a real connection with me. Rather than be drawn to some mirage and then just later down the road just figure out, nope, not a good match. At times we are all afraid to put ourselves out there. Our brand, our company, our true essence, because we're afraid of getting mocked, or we're afraid of being ridiculed. We're just afraid of the reaction that people will have, whether it's rejection or just ignoring it or questioning everything. But as Jen pointed out, we can't find our customers, we can't find our fans without putting ourselves out there. But you've seen lots of companies sand off the rough edges, content to blend in with all of their competitors, which means that everyone will just look over them and just forget them, because they don't stand out in any way. They just look like everyone else. So it's impossible to reject them because they didn't get noticed to begin with. So the challenge is to define your brand values for your blog, for your company, for yourself, so that you stand out. Now, if you haven't done a branding assessment before, one way to do it is you work with an ad agency, or you work with a branding specialist. You can work with my company. Jen does those for our clients. And I had her take me through the process because I didn't know what it involved. But she sits down with the client and interviews them about, their company and their target audience and their history and their products and so on. And she comes up with 3 to 5 keywords that describe what that brand is. No more than 5 keywords, because beyond that it just becomes meaningless. So I went through the process with her, and this is what she came up with for me. Involved, honest, smart, funny, articulate. They're just words on a screen. I don't think y'all have ever met me before, so except for the 10 minutes I've been talking, you have no way to know if any of this is accurate. Now, I know it's accurate because since she gave me the assessment, I realized something. I don't have to work at any of these. This is who I am. She nailed it on the spot. And so whether you're hearing me speak, or you're reading a blog post, or you're reading my email newsletter, or you come to an event of mine, you're going to find elements of being involved, and being honest, and being smart, and being funny, and being articulate. So those are the things that are throughout all of my marketing, throughout all of my interactions, throughout everything that I do. But I don't have to work at it, because it is an accurate assessment. So this is what keeps me distinguished from any other communication consultant that you might meet. And if this is something that your company needs, great. That's a good starting point. So you can work with an agency or a branding expert to find your core values. If you are limited in resources, you can convene a focus group and have them examine what your brand is. So you pull together your best customers and your longest serving employees and closest friends. And you have them list adjectives that describe what they think your brand is. And those adjectives are going to be positive and negative. But you're going to write them down on a chalkboard or a whiteboard or a pad of paper until you have like 50 to 100 adjectives. And then you got to narrow it down. So each person in your focus group, they just pick their top 3. They can just write it down on a sheet of paper, or they can go up to the chalkboard and just put tick marks by their top 3. And it might take you several rounds to narrow it down. So like the first round, everybody put votes, and you tally all the votes, and your top 20 stay. Or every adjective that doesn't have a tick mark by it, or only one tick mark, you just erase or cross through. And you narrow it down to 20, and then you narrow it down to 10, and then you get it down to 3, 4, or 5. That's a different way to approach it, but brand is perception. What people perceive your brand to be is your brand. The problem is if those brand values that your focus group comes up with doesn't match what the brand is that you're trying to put out there, you've got disconnect. And you're going to have to work harder to make sure that your real brand shows through. I use Apple products like computers and phones. I've used them for a long time. And it's hard to escape, but Apple spends a lot on marketing, on television and print and in their product launches and events. And so, they have a brand that's, you could describe it as luxurious or, hip or cutting edge, because this is the brand they're trying to cultivate. But, if we interview a majority of the consumers who are Apple users and non-Apple users, then their perception isn't the same as what they're putting out there. If they perceive it as overpriced or hipsterish or not reliable, then it doesn't matter how much money Apple is throwing at the problem. There's a disconnect between what you as consumers perceive the brand to be and the message they're putting out there. So that focus group is good at determining if there is a perception gap, if what you think the brand is doesn't match what everyone else thinks it is. I mentioned that you want to get it down to 3, 4, 5 values. Your temptation might be 10 brand values, because all 10 of these things represent what we do, or all 15 of these things represent what we do. But you're going to have to fight through that temptation, because again, it's just like that generic dating profile. If you're trying to be everything to everyone, you end up being nothing to no one. So you really have to get it down to those 3, 4, or 5, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the last section. But in defining your values and figuring out what you stand for, you can work with an agency, you can convene your own focus group, but make sure it's down to those core values, nothing more than that. So I mentioned that in putting all this together for your blog and for your brand, this is a secret weapon that you can use, and it's something that'll help you stand out without necessarily spending millions of dollars on campaigns. So this means that this is something that levels the playing field, because if you're at a smaller organization, this is something that you can deploy and achieve big results, and that's consistency. So how do you make sure that what you're doing is consistent on all platforms for your brand and your blog? 5 years ago, I helped start a nonprofit organization. It's called the Alabama Social Media Association. And it was basically a nonprofit dedicated to educating people in social media for free. But the first time we ever met about it was January 2nd, and in 2011, and we basically were talking to a consultant figuring out what we needed to do to launch this thing as quickly as possible, because we set a deadline of March 1st for the announcement for the first meeting. So we had less than 2 months to get this going. But you can see here, there's our website and Eventbrite event and Facebook page, Flickr page, and Twitter account. And so you see, as we were getting ready, we had various versions of our logo. Like there's a long version, and there's a more compact version, and there's the shortened version, Al Sakmi, on our social media pages. So you look at the versions of the logo. Does anyone want to take a guess as to how much time and how much money we spent on putting the logo together? Anyone here work in design or branding that wants to hazard a guess? Not long. Any other guesses?
Not expensive.
Not expensive. These are really committed answers. So we're about a week from launch day, so it's the end of February, and the person that we had working on the logo just fell through. And so we're getting ready to launch on March 1st, and we don't have anything. We don't have any colors, we don't have any fonts, don't have any design whatsoever. And we're about to roll this out to a lot of people. So I volunteered to put together a placeholder logo with the intention that after launch date on March 1st, we'd find another designer to work with our specifications, and we'd swap out the logo. So I put this set of logos together in about 5 to 10 minutes in Photoshop, and it looks like someone with limited Photoshop experience spent 5 to 10 minutes putting them together. We rolled out on March 1st. We announced it on 2 TV stations. We announced it on social media. We sent out media releases. And the first event, which we announced that morning, we sold out like 150 tickets in about an hour and a half. So we couldn't have asked for better results. We often find that we want everything to be perfect when we're rolling something out. That if it's not perfect, it's going to hold people back. And what I found time and again was that as long as it was consistent, as long as people recognized it, and it all tied together, that was far more important than how much money and how professional a logo we got. The joke was on me, by the way, because after March 1st, we never did find a designer. And that stupid placeholder logo that I slapped together, we were stuck with. But the branding elements, they weren't perfect. They certainly weren't the things that we were dreaming of when we had first met, but it still conveyed what we needed it to our audience. And part of that was having consistency across platforms. So no matter how people found out about us, they knew where we were coming from. If you're going to use consistency, the first thing that's got to happen is you got to show up. You have to be present. If you have a blog for your company and you haven't posted on it in weeks or months, you're not present. When I go and look at different brands and companies' Facebook pages, more often than not, I find people asking questions, people leaving comments, people leaving complaints, and zero response from the page owner. They're not showing up. And the message that they're sending about their brand is very clear. It's not the message they want to send about their brand, but I'm getting it loud and clear nonetheless. So if you're going to go to the trouble to create social channels, you have to at least show up. It'd be ideal if you also updated it on a regular basis to reinforce your brand message. But if you're not even going to bother to respond to people, you are shaping your brand 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with zero effort. But it is a terrible brand message that you are sending out there. I mentioned before that my brand values involved on a smart, funny, articulate. It's easy for me to remember because I live them and because there's only 5 of them. And that's important because as I think about what I'm going to post on Twitter, or when I'm writing my weekly newsletter, or when I'm coming up with a blog post, or when I'm deciding what to talk about in presentation, I want it to all resonate with those values. Everything has to be permeated with involved and honest and smart and funny and articulate. This is likely, unless you go to the PRAM conference next month, this is likely the only chance you'll ever see me speak. So I have a limited window of opportunity to impress upon you this message, but also how I do it. If you follow me on Twitter, you might only check out a few of my tweets. If I don't manage to hit some of those brand values, you can't figure out how I'm different from all of the millions of other people on Twitter. Same with my blog posts. It's got to reflect my brand because those people who are coming into the blog, they're not all loyal readers. Some just randomly stumbled in through Google, or someone on Facebook shared a link with them, or someone on LinkedIn shared a link from the site. And so that is my one opportunity to show off my brand and how I'm different from the competition. If you have 20 brand values, good luck getting them all into a Facebook post. But if you have 3, 4, or 5, you can consistently put it out there. You can consistently show off that brand in Instagram, or in your print materials, or in a billboard campaign. That's why it's so important to get those values crystal clear about what your brand stands for. Again, if it's fuzzy, it leads to fuzzy thinking and fuzzy output and bad interaction. You're going to get negative responses. You're going to get detractors. You're going to get negative comments. You're going to get people who question what you do. And you can respond on impulse, which is what I've done in the past, or you can just respond within your brand values. In running blogs for 11 years, I've gotten certainly my fair share of negative comments. And my first instinct, and it's a bad instinct, is just fight back. Just go for the jugular. Which is terrible because I can come up with some pretty mean insults to whoever anonymously is commenting on my site. But I have a better way to approach it, which is, again, brand values: involved, honest, smart, funny, articulate. Well, I can talk about, well, I didn't appreciate that comment because it hurt my feelings. And I think that this discussion merits something better than just us going back and forth like that. That's articulate, and that's honest, and hopefully a smarter approach to it. But if you're a blogger who is fun and outgoing, then you can respond with that tone. If you're snarky, you can respond with that tone, because if you don't respond with snark, people aren't going to recognize your brand, even in a comment responding to someone else. So you can use your brand values to shape not only the message you're putting out there, but the interaction, the give and take that you're having with people who are responding to your brand, your message, your marketing, your website. So with consistency, it's important you just show up. It's important that you permeate everything you do with those values, and that you limit your reactions. You know, sometimes the best policy is not to respond at all if it's just someone who's obviously trolling you. But if you do need to respond using your values. Don't just use that first bad impulse. If you come up with a question, you don't ask it today, just email me, wade@wadekwon.com. You can also go to my website, birminghamblogging.com. I take questions on Twitter all the time, so you can also tweet me at WadeOnTweets. And there's contact information on the postcard, so you can also just reach me by the address on the postcard. I'm happy to take questions whenever they come up, because you may start to work on some of your branding and your blog, and down the road you're going to run into a challenge that we didn't even cover today. I'm more than happy to take your questions whenever they come up. As you set your goals, as you define what your values are, as you embrace being consistent in deploying it, you realize that your brand isn't just some logo. It's not some colors. It's not a font choice. It goes way beyond that. It's the values you stand for, and it's what people perceive your brand values to be. But if you put all of this together, you not only have a great blog that helps you accomplish your business goals, you have a great and consistent brand that people love, that pulls in the right audience. It won't pull in everyone. Well, it'll definitely pull in the audience that cares about what you do and wants to know more about it. And it helps shape all of it deliberately and as quickly as possible, so that your company shines among all the others. Thank you.